I never thought I would be sitting here telling you this. If you had asked me a few months ago, I would have laughed in your face. But I don't have that luxury anymore. I don't have the luxury of pretending everything is fine, that the world is what we think it is. I know the truth now, and it's eating me alive. I was a soldier. I followed orders. I believed in the mission. We were told we were fighting for something bigger than ourselves, something noble, something worth dying for. I believed that right up until the moment I died. And that's why you need to listen, because everything they told us was a lie. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Sweep a village, secure the area, extract intel. We had done this dozens of times before, and it always played out the same way. We moved in before dawn, using the cover of darkness to our advantage. The village was quiet. Too quiet. My gut told me something was off, but I ignored it. I had been in the field long enough to know that silence didn't always mean danger. Sometimes people just knew when to stay out of the way. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Something beyond the scope of enemy scouts or snipers. I told myself I was being paranoid. We split into fire teams and began clearing houses. The first few were empty, abandoned in a hurry. Plates of half-eaten food, clothes strewn across the floor, doors left swinging open. It was like the people had vanished into thin air. My heart pounded harder than it should have. Something about the place felt wrong, like we had walked into a trap we couldn't see. My radio crackled. "Movement up ahead!" The call came from Lopez, one of our best scouts. He was posted on a rooftop, eyes scanning the dirt road that ran through the center of the village. Single target, not armed, just standing there. That was when I felt it again. That cold, crawling sensation in my spine, like something had wrapped around me and was squeezing. Slowly, deliberately. I crept to the edge of the alley and peered out. The figure stood in the middle of the road, barely illuminated by the moonlight. He was an old man, thin and frail, dressed in loose robes that fluttered in the wind. His head was tilted slightly, as if he was listening to something. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at nothing. "What the hell is he doing?" Smith muttered beside me. I had no answer. Civilians didn't just stand in the open like that. Not in a war zone. Not unless they were trying to get shot or they knew something we didn't. I gripped my rifle tighter. "Sir, should we engage?" Lopez asked over comms. Before I could answer, the old man finally moved. He lifted his head and turned towards us. I swear to God, in that moment, time slowed. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, eyes black as coal, empty, hollow. But it wasn't his face that made my stomach drop. It was his expression. He was smiling. Not the smile of a man relieved to see help, not the weary smile of a survivor. It was a knowing smile, a cruel, twisted thing that sent ice straight through my veins. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness like he had never been there at all. "What the fuck was that?" Smith breathed. No one answered. No one had an answer. We pushed forward, faster now, trying to ignore the unease gripping our chests. We reached the main square where an old mosque stood, its walls pockmarked by bullet holes. The entrance was open, shadows pooling inside. My radio clicked again. "Lopez, report." Silence. "Lopez, do you copy?" More silence. My stomach turned. I looked up at his last known position. The rooftop was empty. No sign of him, no movement, nothing. Where the hell did he go? Then, all at once, the world exploded. A deafening roar filled my ears as the night lit up with fire and shrapnel. The blast wave threw me off my feet, slamming me against the side of a building. My helmet cracked against the concrete, and for a second everything blurred. Screams, gunfire, the frantic shouts of my team. The ambush had been waiting for us all along. I tried to push myself up, my limbs sluggish, my vision swimming. I could see figures moving through the smoke, silhouettes darting between ruined buildings. My radio was dead, my rifle knocked from my hands. Blood dripped down my face, hot and thick. I rolled onto my back, sucking in ragged breaths. Above me, the sky burned. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness like falling stars. The smell of burning flesh and metal choked the air. I turned my head and saw Smith lying a few feet away, his eyes staring at nothing, his throat a red, gaping wound. I knew then. I knew I wasn't getting out of this. Another explosion rocked the ground, and the pain in my chest sharpened. I coughed, and the taste of iron filled my mouth. My body felt heavy, too heavy. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and slow, like a drum fading into silence. The sounds of battle grew distant, muffled, as if I was sinking underwater. My vision darkened at the edges, tunneling into blackness. Then, just as everything started to slip away, I felt something else, a pull. Not physical, not like someone grabbing me, but deeper. Something inside me being yanked free. And that was when I realized I was dying. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed. There was no gradual fading, no slow drift into unconsciousness. 1 second I was lying there, barely breathing, the taste of blood thick in my mouth. The next I was standing upright, completely unharmed, staring down at my own body. I didn't understand at first. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. My body was still on the ground, twisted at an unnatural angle, my uniform soaked in blood. My chest wasn't rising, wasn't moving at all, I wasn't breathing. And yet, I was here. I turned, looking around, expecting anyone to notice. But the battle raged on as if nothing had happened. Bullets cut through the air, kicking up dirt and shattering stone. Explosions rumbled in the distance. My squad was still fighting, shouting orders, dragging the wounded to cover. Smith's body lay motionless where I had last seen it. I opened my mouth to call out, to scream, but no sound came. My voice was gone. My presence was gone. I took a step forward, reaching for one of my men, my hand passing straight through his shoulder like mist. Panic surged in my chest. This wasn't right. I was supposed to be dead. Or alive. Not this, not stuck between. I looked down at my hands, expecting to see flesh, but they weren't solid. They shimmered, flickered, like heat waves rising off the desert sand. I wasn't human anymore. I was something else, something weightless, untethered. Then, I felt it. The pull. It wasn't something I could see, but I could feel it wrapping around me, dragging me upward. I resisted, my instincts screaming at me to stay, to fight. But the harder I fought, the stronger it became. It was like gravity had reversed, like I was being ripped out of the world I had known. The battlefield blurred beneath me, the sounds of war fading into a hollow silence. Darkness stretched above, vast and endless, swallowing the stars. I was being taken somewhere beyond anything I had ever imagined. And then the world shifted. I wasn't in the battlefield anymore. I was floating in a vast, endless void, weightless, suspended between nothing and everything. The silence was absolute, crushing, heavier than any sound I had ever heard. And yet, there was something else. A presence. It was there, just beyond my vision, watching, waiting. I turned, and for the first time, I saw them. Figures, barely visible, shifting in and out of the shadows. They weren't human, not anymore. Their forms flickered, stretched, twisted in unnatural ways. Some of them looked familiar, like men I had fought alongside, their faces gaunt, hollow, eyes wide with something worse than fear. Others were unrecognizable, ancient, their features distorted, as if they had been here for centuries, forgotten by time. They drifted closer, circling, whispering in voices that weren't voices at all. I tried to move, to escape, but I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed, my thoughts unraveling as their whispers dug into my mind. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, but I could feel the meaning behind their words, like poison seeping into my soul. They were trapped, lost, and they were warning me. Something else was coming. The presence in the void stirred, and a cold terror unlike anything I had ever known gripped me. This was not heaven, this was not hell, this was something worse, something ancient, something hungry, and it had noticed me. The whispers turned to screams, arms. The shadows twisted, writhing as if in agony. The figures around me tried to pull away, but there was nowhere to go. A force surged through the darkness, a pressure so immense it felt like the entire universe was collapsing inward. And then I saw it. A shape, vast and formless, moving through the void with a slowness that was deliberate, calculating. It wasn't a man, it wasn't a demon. It was something else, something beyond comprehension. I couldn't see its face, if it even had one, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me, stripping me bare. My memories, my thoughts, my very essence. It saw everything, and it was amused. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but I was powerless. The pull grew stronger, dragging me toward it, toward whatever fate awaited those who strayed too far from life. The figures around me clung to the edges of the void, their forms dissolving as they tried to resist. Some were swallowed whole, vanishing into nothing. Others simply faded, as if they had never existed at all. I was next. The thing in the void reached for me, tendrils of darkness unraveling, wrapping around my limbs. It wasn't solid, but it wasn't air either. It was something in between, something that made my very soul recoil in horror. And then, just as it began to pull me in, a light exploded across the void. It wasn't warm, it wasn't comforting, it was blinding, pure, absolute. The thing in the darkness recoiled, its form twisting in rage. The tendrils snapped back, releasing me. The figures in the void shrank away, shielding themselves. The whispers turned to silence. And then I was falling. Faster than I thought possible, plummeting through space, through reality itself. The darkness receded, the battlefield rushed back into view. My body lay where I had left it, still lifeless, still broken. And then, pain. A searing, electric jolt ripped through me, slamming me back into flesh and bone. My lungs convulsed, sucking in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. My heart thundered, pounding against my ribs, forcing blood through dead veins. My fingers twitched, my eyes snapped open. I was back. But I was not the same. I wasn't back for long. The moment my lungs filled with air, the pain hit me like a sledgehammer. Every nerve in my body screamed, my chest burning as if I had been struck by lightning. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and for a moment I thought I was still in the battle, still dying. But then I felt it again, that pull, stronger this time, relentless, dragging me back into the abyss I had barely escaped. I tried to fight it, but there was no resisting. 1 second I was gasping for breath, struggling against the weight of my broken body. The next, I was gone. The world around me peeled away like old paint, unraveling in slow, shimmering waves. Sound disappeared first, then light, then sensation itself. It was like sinking into warm water, like being swallowed by the very fabric of reality. And then I was somewhere else. At first, I thought it was nothingness, but then my eyes adjusted. A vast, open expanse stretched before me, endless and surreal. The ground beneath my feet wasn't solid, but it wasn't air either. It was something in between, shifting and pulsing like the surface of a black ocean. The sky, or whatever passed for a sky here, was a swirling mass of deep indigos and violent reds, shifting like storm clouds caught in an eternal battle. There was no sun, no stars, no horizon, just an infinite stretch of dark and light colliding, merging, breaking apart again. I wasn't alone. They stood in the distance, scattered across the landscape like broken statues. Some were near, some far, but all of them were still. Hundreds, thousands of figures, frozen in place, their faces turned downward as if they had been abandoned mid-prayer. Their forms flickered, shifting between what looked like human bodies and something else. Dark silhouettes, stretched and unnatural, like shadows cast in the wrong direction. Some were missing pieces, arms dissolving into mist, legs fading into nothing. Others were whole but eerily motionless, trapped in a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I took a step forward and the ground didn't move, but somehow I was closer. Another step, and the figures became clearer. They weren't just any souls, they were warriors. I saw tattered uniforms from battles fought centuries apart. Roman centurions with rusted helmets, Mongol horsemen frozen mid-charge, knights in broken armor, rifles slung across the backs of soldiers from wars I couldn't even recognize. Every war that had ever been fought had left its dead here. They stood together in their silence, a cemetery without graves, an army without purpose. And then they moved. Not all at once, just one at first. A soldier near me, his uniform shredded, his face half burned, lifted his head. His eyes were black voids, empty, endless. Then another turned, and another. Soon all of them were looking at me, their hollow gazes drilling into my very core. My breath hitched, my pulse pounded, even though I wasn't sure I had a body anymore. One of them stepped forward. His face was young, barely out of his 20s, but his eyes were ancient, burdened with something heavier than time. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, a sound, low, guttural, like the grinding of stone against stone. And then, as if his presence had been a signal, the others began to move. They stepped closer, their bodies shifting, flickering between flesh and shadow, as if they were trapped between what they had been and what they had become. I took a step back. The ground rippled beneath me. A voice, not my own, rang in my head. "You are not supposed to be here." The weight of those words crushed me. It wasn't a threat, it was a fact. I didn't belong here. I wasn't meant to see this place. But it was too late. The soldier in front of me raised his arm, pointing at something beyond the shifting mass of lost warriors. I turned my head and saw it. A gate. Massive, towering, made of a material that looked like it had been carved from the night itself. Symbols I didn't recognize pulsed along its surface, shifting and rearranging like living things. A thick fog seeped from its base, curling around the feet of the dead, wrapping around their forms like tendrils. The air around it vibrated, heavy with something I couldn't name, and beyond it, there was something else, something waiting. I didn't want to go near it. Every instinct in me screamed to turn away, to run, but there was nowhere to go. The soldiers around me watched in silence, their heads tilting in eerie unison, as if they were listening to something I couldn't hear. The gate pulsed. A deep, resonant hum filled the space, making my bones, or whatever I had now. Then, the fog shifted. Something moved on the other side. Not just one thing, many. Shapes, vast and indistinct, pressing against the surface of the gate, writhing, shifting, eager. They knew I was there. They had been waiting. I felt the pull again, stronger than before, dragging me toward the gate. My feet, if I even had feet, slid forward, the distance between me and that towering abyss shrinking faster than I could comprehend. Panic surged through me. No, I couldn't go there. Whatever was beyond that gate, it wasn't meant for me. It wasn't meant for anyone. I fought against the force, but it was like trying to swim against a tidal wave. The soldiers around me didn't move to stop it. They only watched. Some with pity, some with indifference, some with something that almost looked like relief, as if they were glad it wasn't them this time. The gate began to open. The fog coiled tighter around me, tendrils wrapping around my limbs, pulling, yanking. The darkness beyond the gate deepened, a void so absolute it seemed to devour the very concept of light. And then, I saw them. The things beyond. They weren't human. They had never been human. Their forms were too fluid, too wrong, their movements erratic, unnatural, eyes. Hundreds of them blinked open across their shifting flesh, fixing on me with a hunger that made my soul recoil. Mouths, too many to count, grinned wide with jagged, uneven teeth. They surged forward, a tidal wave of horror, and I knew if they reached me, I would never come back. I screamed. In that light, blinding, searing, absolute, it wasn't warm, it wasn't cold, it simply was. A force greater than anything I had ever known slammed into the space around me, shattering the pull of the gate, forcing the fog to recoil. The creatures shrieked, recoiling like insects caught in a blaze. The gate slammed shut with a sound like thunder, the impact shaking the very fabric of the world. I collapsed, gasping, shaking, though I had no lungs, no body. The presence of the warriors around me faded. The landscape blurred, the void cracked apart like shattered glass. And then I was somewhere else, somewhere higher, and I was no longer alone. I was rising, not in the way a body floats in water, not like falling in reverse, but as if I were being pulled upward by something incomprehensible. The darkness of the battlefield, the void of the dead warriors, the horror lurking behind that gate, all of it faded, shrinking beneath me until it was nothing but a distant shadow. The weight of it all, the crushing fear, the pull of whatever was waiting beyond, began to loosen its grip. For the first time since my death, I felt something that almost resembled relief. But then I saw where I was going, and relief turned to awe. Above me stretched an expanse so vast, so endless, that the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend it. It wasn't the sky, it wasn't space, it was something else, something more. A realm without time, without limits, glowing with a radiance that was neither light nor fire, but something entirely different. The very air, if it could be called air, vibrated with a presence so powerful it made my soul tremble. I wasn't just approaching it, I was being allowed in. Then I was there. A great boundless plain stretched before me, not solid yet not empty. It pulsed like a living thing, shimmering with colors I had no words for, hues beyond human vision. And in the distance, figures stood waiting. They weren't like the soldiers I had seen before. These beings weren't twisted by war, weren't trapped in a place of suffering. They were whole, brilliant, impossibly radiant. Their forms flickered between what my mind could recognize and something greater, something beyond definition. And at the center of them stood one presence above all others. I couldn't see him, not fully, not as I had been able to see the old man in the village or the faces of my fallen comrades. He wasn't bound by form the way we were, but I felt him, a force that filled everything, that pulsed through me, around me, within me. It was power, but not the kind men fought for. It was something infinitely older, something that had always been, and as his attention turned to me, my very essence felt exposed, as if I were standing naked before the force that had breathed life into existence itself. I knew who he was. Before a single word was spoken, before I could ask, I knew, because a part of me had always known. This was the one, the source, the truth. And as that realization crashed over me, I understood something even more terrifying. He hadn't brought me here to comfort me. He hadn't lifted me from the battlefield to offer peace. He had brought me here to show me something, something I was meant to take back. Then the visions began. It wasn't like watching a film. It wasn't a series of images flashing before my eyes. It was something deeper, more complete. I saw history unfold, but not the way it had been taught, not the way we had believed it. I saw wars stretching back further than human memory, further than records could recall. Armies clashing, blood soaking into the earth, cities burning, civilizations rising and falling in endless cycles of destruction. But now I saw the truth beneath it all. These wars had never been about land, never been about power or politics. That was the lie, the distraction. They had been orchestrated, guided by hands unseen, forces that did not bleed, did not die, but fed. They fed on suffering, on fear, on death. I saw them, not as men, not as demons in the way stories describe them, but as something else, something that existed in the cracks between our reality. They moved unseen, whispering into the minds of kings and generals, planting ideas, fueling hatred, ensuring that mankind never truly knew peace. They didn't need weapons. We were their weapons. Our rage, our greed, our need for conquest. It was all cultivated, manipulated, twisted into an endless cycle that kept them fed. I watched as history played out, but now with the knowledge of the hands moving the pieces. I saw Rome burn. I saw the trenches of World War I filled with dying men. I saw the great empires rise and crumble, each time believing they were different, that they were in control, never realizing they were being led by unseen masters. I saw soldiers just like me, believing they were fighting for something noble, dying in fields and deserts and forests, never knowing they had been nothing more than fuel for something beyond their understanding. Then I saw what was coming. The future wasn't set, but the path had been laid. The greatest war humanity had ever known was on the horizon, not because of resources, not because of religion, not because of leaders clashing, but because the cycle was reaching its end. The things that fed on us, the things that had orchestrated every battle, every atrocity, they were growing desperate. And in their desperation, they were pushing humanity toward a final breaking point. I saw cities crumble beneath fire and steel. I saw people turning against each other, not for survival, but because they had been made to believe it was the only way. I saw nations falling, alliances shattered, and above it all, I saw the shadows moving, pulling the strings, ensuring that mankind never looked beyond the surface, never questioned who truly benefited from their suffering. And then I saw the choice. Because there was still a choice. I wasn't just being shown this as a warning. I was being shown this because humanity had reached the threshold. If enough people saw the truth, if enough people understood the game being played, the cycle could be broken. The wars could end. The things in the shadows could starve. But it wouldn't be easy, because they would fight back. They always had. They had silenced those who saw too much before. They had erased those who tried to warn the world. And now I understood why I had been brought here, because I had to take this truth back. I had to tell them, even if no one believed me, even if they called me insane, even if they tried to silence me. I had to make them see. The vision ended. The realm around me trembled, fading at the edges. The presence before me remained, vast and unshaken. No words were spoken, but I understood. It is time. The pull returned, but this time it was downward, faster, stronger. The light of that place vanished, replaced by pain, by sensation, by the weight of a body that had been lifeless just moments before. I gasped, air flooding my lungs like fire, my heart pounded against my ribs, my fingers clenched. I was back, but I was no longer the same. I woke up gasping, my chest heaving like I had been drowning, my lungs burning as if they had just been filled with fire. My body convulsed, my fingers curled into fists, and every nerve in me screamed in agony. I had felt pain before, injuries in combat, broken bones, burns. But this was different. This wasn't just physical pain. It was the pain of being ripped from something greater, something beyond, and forced back into the confines of flesh and blood. I could hear voices shouting around me, the beeping of machines, the frantic movement of people in a room that smelled sterile, cold, artificial. My vision blurred, the bright fluorescent lights above me searing into my skull. Someone was holding my wrist, checking my pulse. Another voice muttered something about vitals stabilizing. Then, closer, a whisper. He was dead. He was gone. I wanted to speak, to tell them I knew. I had been gone. I had seen what was beyond, had felt the truth wrap around me like a force greater than any war, any death I had ever known. But my throat was raw, my body weak, and all I could do was blink, let the reality of my surroundings settle in. I was in a hospital. Not on the battlefield, not in that endless, shifting plain where the lost warriors stood trapped between existence and oblivion. I was back in the world I had known, the world of walls and ceilings and hands gripping my arms, checking my pulse, shining lights into my eyes. A doctor hovered over me, eyes wide with something between shock and disbelief. "Sergeant, can you hear me?" I forced a slow nod. My body felt foreign, heavy, as if I had been stuffed back into something too small, too fragile. "You coded," he continued, his voice shaking. "You were dead for 6 minutes. No heartbeat, no oxygen. We tried everything, and then—" He trailed off, glancing at the nurse beside him as if she could confirm what they had all witnessed. She only shook her head, unable to form words. "And then you just came back." I swallowed, my throat dry as dust. Where? My voice cracked, barely audible. "You're in a military hospital," the doctor said. "They evacuated you after the attack. You were unresponsive. We thought—" He stopped himself, as if saying it aloud would somehow undo the fact that I was still breathing, still here. But I wasn't. Not really. Because a part of me was still there. The visions hadn't faded. The knowledge, the truth I had seen still burned behind my eyes like an afterimage imprinted on my soul. The war beyond the war. The things that fed on us. The cycle that had repeated for centuries, unseen, unquestioned. And the final choice humanity had to make before it was too late. I knew it wasn't just something I had been shown for my own understanding. It had been given to me for a reason. I had to tell them. I had to make them see. But as I lay there, weak and shaking, I realized the weight of that task. Who would believe me? A soldier who had been clinically dead, rambling about unseen forces manipulating wars, about a coming reckoning that no intelligence agency, no government, no leader had ever acknowledged? They would think it was brain damage, trauma, hallucinations from lack of oxygen. They would write me off as another veteran suffering from PTSD, another soldier whose mind had cracked under the weight of battle. And if they did listen, if I somehow managed to convince them, what then? The things I had seen, the forces orchestrating everything, they weren't just going to let me speak. They had silenced others before me. I had felt it in that place. The ones who had come close to revealing the truth, to breaking the cycle, had been erased, removed before they could spread the message. Wars had not only been fought on battlefields, they had been fought in history books, in whispers, in quiet disappearances of those who asked too many questions. And now, I was one of them. The thought sent a chill through me deeper than any cold I had ever known. I wasn't safe. Even here, surrounded by doctors and nurses, by the hum of machines monitoring my heartbeat, I knew that eyes were already watching. The shadows behind the war, the architects of conflict, they would know I had seen. They would be waiting to see what I would do next. The nurse spoke softly, breaking me from my thoughts. "Your commander is here. He's been waiting." I forced myself to sit up, the effort sending waves of exhaustion through my body. Every movement felt wrong, sluggish, like I was still learning how to inhabit this form again. The door opened and my commanding officer stepped in. His face was unreadable, his eyes sharp, analyzing me the way one might examine a piece of malfunctioning equipment. "Sergeant," he said slowly, measuring my response, "it's good to see you awake." I didn't respond. He pulled a chair closer, lowering himself onto it with deliberate ease. "The doctors tell me you were gone for 6 minutes," he continued. "No brain damage, no loss of function. It's a miracle." The way he said it, flat and detached, told me he didn't believe in miracles. He was waiting for something, for me to slip up, for me to say something that didn't align with reality. I met his gaze. "What happened to the rest of the unit?" His jaw tightened. "We lost 5. Lopez and Smith didn't make it. The rest are stable. Extraction came too late." He studied me carefully, waiting to see how I would react. I nodded slowly, but the grief felt distant. Not because I didn't care, I did, but because I had seen something far worse than death. "I need to talk to someone," I said, my voice stronger now. "Higher up. Intelligence, maybe?" The commander narrowed his eyes. "Why?" I hesitated. How much could I say? How much could I reveal without tipping my hand? Because what happened out there, what I saw, it's bigger than us. For the first time, his expression changed. A flicker of something. Concern? Curiosity? "What exactly did you see, Sergeant?" I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I could feel it, the weight of the unseen forces pressing against me, waiting, listening. If I spoke too soon, if I wasn't careful, they would know. So I swallowed the truth, buried it deep, and chose my words carefully. Something I don't think I was supposed to. Silence stretched between us. The commander exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll talk soon." But as he stood, as he turned toward the door, I saw the tension in his shoulders, the stiffness in his movements. He wasn't just dismissing me, he was reporting me. The door shut behind him, and I let out a shaky breath. I had returned, but I wasn't safe. And if I wanted to reveal the truth, I would have to be smarter than the ones who wanted it buried. I don't know how much time I have. Maybe they're already watching. Maybe by the time you see this, I'll be gone. But I have to try. I have to tell you what I saw. Not because I want to, but because I have no choice. Because if I stay silent, if I let them win, then everything I've been through, all the pain, the terror, the truth, will have been for nothing. And I can't let that happen. I was a soldier. I fought in wars I thought I understood. I believed in duty, in honor, in the idea that what we were doing had a purpose. I followed orders. I killed when I had to. I buried my doubts deep because doubt gets you killed. But none of it mattered. None of it was real. The wars, the conflicts, the endless cycles of violence, they weren't what we thought they were. They weren't about politics or land or freedom. They were something else, something worse. I saw it when I died. When I left my body, when I drifted above the battlefield, I thought I was just another casualty. But I wasn't alone. There were others, lost souls, warriors from every war that had ever been fought, trapped in a place between life and death, their bodies long gone but their suffering never ending. They weren't resting. They weren't at peace. They were waiting, bound to something they didn't understand, something ancient, something that had fed on them for centuries. And then I saw the truth. We are not in control. We never have been. The wars we fight, the blood we spill, the suffering we endure, it's not for us. It's not even for the men who send us to die. It's for them, the ones behind the curtain, the ones in the shadows, the ones who have been orchestrating our destruction for longer than history remembers. They are not kings, not generals, not governments. They are something else, something unseen, something that moves between us, whispering in the ears of the powerful, planting the seeds of conflict, ensuring that we never stop killing each other. Because war is not about victory, it's about sacrifice, and we are the offering. I know how this sounds. I know you don't want to believe me. I wouldn't believe me either if I were watching this. I'd think I was insane, a soldier who saw too much, a man broken by war, another casualty of PTSD, hallucinations, paranoia. That's what they want you to think. That's what they count on. Because as long as you dismiss it, as long as you laugh it off, as long as you tell yourself it's just another ghost story, they win. But you have to listen. I saw what's coming, the final war. The one that will end everything. They're pushing us toward it, guiding us like cattle to the slaughter. It won't be like the wars before. It won't be about nations or ideologies. It will be about survival. And by the time you realize the truth, it will be too late. Unless we stop it. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if we're already too far gone. But I know one thing. Knowledge is power. If enough of us see them, if enough of us understand what's really happening, maybe, just maybe, the cycle can be broken. But they won't let that happen easily. They never have. I don't know how much longer I have. Since I came back, things haven't been the same. Shadows move where they shouldn't. People I don't recognize seem to be watching me. I hear whispers in places where no one is speaking. Maybe they're just in my head. Or maybe they're real. Maybe they've already decided I've seen too much. If I disappear, if this video cuts off, if you never hear from me again, remember what I've told you. Remember that I tried. And don't let them erase this. Don't let them win. Because if you do, you'll never even know you lost.